My name is Camille Renault. I am 29 years old, and right now I am standing in the center of a rooftop terrace in downtown Charleston, South Carolina, surrounded by 112 people who came here tonight to celebrate my engagement. My mother is in the front row, clutching a glass of champagne she has not sipped. My father is beside her, his jaw tight, his reading glasses pushed up onto his forehead the way they always are when he is trying to process something he does not want to believe. My fiance, Derek Holloway, is standing 6 feet to my left, smiling the smile he perfected for his YouTube channel, the one that made 47,000 subscribers believe he was charming and honest and deeply in love with me. Behind me, projected on a 10-foot screen that Derek himself insisted we rent for this party, is a frozen frame from a video. The video is not the one Derek expected to play tonight. The woman on screen is not me. She is Natalie Chen, my maid of honor, my college roommate, my best friend of 11 years. And she is in my bed, in my apartment, with my fiance. The timestamp in the corner reads March 14th, 2025, 9:47 p.m. That was the night I was in Atlanta for a client presentation. The night Derek told me he was staying in to edit content. The night Natalie told me she was visiting her sister in Savannah. The room is silent. 112 people, and not a single sound except the faint hum of the projector fan and the distant bass of a boat horn somewhere on the harbor. Derek's smile is gone. Natalie, seated at table 4, has her hand over her mouth. Her champagne flute is tipped sideways, spilling slowly onto the white linen tablecloth, a pale golden stain spreading toward the centerpiece. Nobody is looking at her, and everybody is looking at her. What they did not know was that I had been planning this moment for exactly 43 days. What they did not know was that the woman standing at this podium tonight was not the same woman who cried alone on a hotel bathroom floor in Atlanta 7 weeks ago. What they did not know was that I had every reason in the world to cancel this engagement party, and instead I chose to throw the most memorable one this city has ever seen. This is that story. I need to take you back. Not to the betrayal, we will get there, but to the beginning, because you need to understand who Derek Holloway was, who I was, and what our life looked like from the outside before you can understand what he did to me behind closed doors. I met Derek in September of 2022 at a branding conference in Nashville called Create Forward. I was there representing my design studio, Renaud Creative, a boutique graphic design firm I had built from scratch after leaving my corporate job at a marketing agency called Meridian Group in 2020. I was 26 at the time. I had 7 clients, a studio apartment on King Street in Charleston with exposed brick walls and a kitchen so small I could touch both counters at the same time, and exactly $14,200 in savings. I was proud of every dollar. I had earned it designing logos, building websites, creating brand identities for small businesses that could not afford the big agencies. It was honest work, and it was mine. Derek was a content creator and part-time marketing manager for a mid-sized tech startup in Nashville called Vantage Labs. He had a YouTube channel called Derek Unfiltered with about 12,000 subscribers at the time. He made videos about dating, relationships, masculinity, self-improvement. That whole genre of men sitting in front of a camera telling other men how to live. He was handsome in a way that made you look twice and then look a third time just to confirm what you saw. 6'1", dark hair that always looked like he had just run his fingers through it. Green eyes, this disarming half grin that felt like it was meant only for you even when you knew it was meant for everyone. He walked up to my booth at the conference, looked at my portfolio for exactly 45 seconds, and said, "You designed all of this? You are seriously talented. Can I take you to dinner so you can tell me how?" I said yes. That was my first mistake. Though if I am being honest, it did not feel like a mistake for a very long time. We dated for 2 years before he proposed. In those 2 years, I learned several things about Derek Holloway that I cataloged quietly in the back of my mind without ever having the courage to name them out loud. He was generous in public and controlling in private. He would buy me flowers at the farmer's market on Saturday morning and then criticize the way I arranged them in the vase when we got home. He would post photos of us on Instagram with captions like, "My queen, my everything, my reason." And then, 30 minutes later, while I was still glowing from the notification likes, tell me that my outfit in the photo made me look like I was trying too hard. He kept a running mental scorecard of everything he did for me and everything I failed to do for him, and the balance was always somehow in his favor. On our first anniversary, October 15th, 2023, he surprised me with a weekend trip to Hilton Head Island. We stayed at a beachfront resort called the Sanctuary. It was beautiful. White sand, ocean breezes, a couple's massage that made me feel like I was floating. He planned everything down to the restaurant reservations, but on the drive home, when I mentioned that I had forgotten to post about the trip on social media, he went quiet. That particular kind of quiet that fills a car like water filling a room, rising inch by inch until you cannot breathe. Then he said, "I spent $3,200 on that weekend, Camille. $3,200. And you could not even take 30 seconds to acknowledge it publicly. Do you know how that makes me look to my audience? Do you know how that looks?" I apologized. I posted 3 photos that night with a long, glowing caption about how grateful I was. He read it, checked the hashtags, nodded, and said, "Better." That was the pattern: grand gestures followed by meticulous accounting. Love with a receipt always attached. There was another incident in March of 2024 that I should have paid more attention to. We were at dinner with 2 of his YouTube friends, Brandon Mercer and Alicia Nguyen, both content creators with their own channels. Brandon had about 90,000 subscribers. Alicia had about 120,000. They were a couple, and they were good people. Or at least, I thought they were. During dinner, Alicia mentioned that she and Brandon were working on a collaborative video about boundaries in relationships. She turned to me and said, "Camille, you should be in it. Your perspective would be amazing." Before I could respond, Derek jumped in. Camille does not really do on-camera stuff. She's more of a behind-the-scenes person. Alicia looked confused. I was just asking. Derek smiled, that big, charming, diffusing smile. I know, I just mean she is private. She does not like the spotlight." Everyone moved on, but I sat there with my wine glass in my hand thinking, he did not ask me. He answered for me. He decided what I wanted without letting me decide first, and the table accepted it. That was the first time I saw clearly how he controlled the narrative of who I was, not with cruelty, with narration. He was always narrating me to other people, defining me before I could define myself. Camille is private. Camille is shy. Camille is behind the scenes, as though he had already written the character description and I was simply filling the role. His YouTube channel grew during our relationship. By mid-2024, he had 31,000 subscribers. His most popular content was a series called Real Talk with Derek, where he would sit in front of the camera, shirt slightly unbuttoned, watch on his wrist, and talk about what men really want, what women do wrong, how to build an authentic relationship. The irony of that word, authentic, would have been funny if it had not been my life. He never mentioned me by name in his videos. I was always my girlfriend, or the woman I am with. He told me it was to protect my privacy. I believed him. In November of 2024, his channel hit a growth spurt. A video called 5 Signs She Is Not the One went semi-viral, getting 280,000 views. Sponsors started reaching out. Brand deals materialized. Derek quit his job at Vantage Labs in January of 2025 to go full-time as a creator. He was making between $8,000 and $12,000 a month from ads, sponsorships, and a Patreon community he called the Inner Circle, where men paid $29 a month for his relationship wisdom. I supported this transition completely. I redesigned his entire channel branding for free. I built his new website from scratch, a 16-page site with an integrated merchandise store and email sign-up that took me 3 weekends to complete. I edited his thumbnails every week. I proofread his scripts. I color-corrected his set lighting. I did all of this while running my own business, which by then had grown to 19 clients and was generating just over $11,000 a month. Derek never acknowledged any of my contributions publicly. When his subscribers asked who designed his new logo in the comments, he said he did it himself. When a sponsor complimented his website during a Zoom call I was sitting just off camera for, he thanked them and changed the subject. I was invisible in his success, but essential to it. The proposal happened on February 14th, 2025, Valentine's Day. Derek planned it for months, or at least that is what he told everyone afterward. He told me we were going to dinner at Husk, one of the nicest restaurants in Charleston, on Queen Street. What I did not know was that he had rented out the entire back patio, strung it with fairy lights, hired a violinist named Elena who played Debussy while we ate, and invited 20 of our closest friends to hide behind a partition wall until the moment he got down on one knee. At 8:15 p.m., after the main course, after a bottle of Sancerre, after a conversation about nothing important that I now realize was him stalling for time, Derek took my hand across the table. He looked at me with those green eyes and said, "Camille, from the moment I met you at that conference in Nashville, I knew you were different. You are the woman who makes me want to be better every single day. Will you marry me?" I said yes. I cried. Our friends rushed out from behind the partition, cheering and clapping. His mother, Patricia Holloway, called on FaceTime from her home in Richmond, Virginia, sobbing with joy. My parents, Michelle and Diane Renault, drove down from Greenville the next morning with a bottle of champagne and a card my mother had clearly been saving for years. It was, by every observable measure, the happiest night of my life. What I did not notice, because I was too busy being in love, was the camera setup. Derek had hired a videographer named Marcus Webb to capture the entire proposal. 2 cameras on tripods, a lapel microphone clipped to Derek's jacket, a wireless audio receiver hidden under the table, professional-grade equipment, multiple angles. Derek told me afterward it was for our personal memories. "We will watch this on our 50th anniversary," he said, kissing my forehead. I smiled and believed every word. 3 weeks later, on March 7th, 2025, I was sitting in my studio on King Street working on a rebrand for a boutique hotel called the Indigo Palms, when Natalie called me. Her voice was strange, tight, like she was speaking through a clenched jaw. "Camille, have you checked Derek's channel today?" I had not. I had been in back-to-back client calls since 8 a.m. "Why?" I asked. "Just look," she said. "I will call you back." I pulled up YouTube on my desktop. Derek had uploaded a new video that morning at 6 a.m., timed for maximum algorithmic reach. The title was "Girlfriend Red Flags I Ignored Because I Was in Love." The thumbnail was a screenshot from our proposal video. My face mid-cry, mascara slightly smudged, mouth open in that ugly beautiful way faces look when you are experiencing the most vulnerable emotion of your life. Below my face, in bold yellow impact font, it read, "I should have Kane noun." The video was 19 minutes and 42 seconds long. I watched every second of it without blinking. Derek sat in his studio, the studio I had designed, the backdrop I had color matched, wearing the navy Henley shirt I had bought him for Christmas, and systematically dissected our relationship for content. He never used my name, but every single person who knew us would know exactly who he was talking about. He used clips from the proposal video. The video he had promised was just for us. He showed the moment I cried and said, "See this? This is love bombing. She is performing. She needs everyone to see her emotions. That is not authentic joy. That is theater." He showed the moment I hugged his mother on FaceTime and said, "Notice how she immediately goes for the family approval. Classic anxious attachment. She needs validation from every person in the room because she cannot validate herself." He showed a clip of me looking at the ring and said, "Watch her eyes. First thing she does is check the ring. Not look at me. The ring. That tells you everything about her priorities." He showed the moment our friends rushed out from behind the partition and said, "And look at how she scans the crowd. She's not overwhelmed with joy. She is counting the audience. She wants to know how many people are watching her performance." 19 minutes. Our most intimate moment, surgically edited into content designed to make me look desperate, manipulative, and shallow. And his audience loved it. By the time I finished watching, the video had 43,000 views. The comments section was a graveyard of casual cruelty. Bro, run. She is definitely the type to baby trap you. Red flag factory. Dump her before the wedding. King. The way she checks the ring first tells you everything, lol. 712 comments. I read every single one. I did not cry. I did not call Derek. I did not post anything online. I sat in my studio chair, closed my laptop, pressed my palms flat against my desk, and stared at the wall for 45 minutes. The wall had a framed print I had bought from a local artist. It said, "Good things take time." I stared at that print until the words stopped meaning anything. Then I opened a new folder on my desktop. I named it Exit. That was March 7th. For the next 6 days, I said nothing to Derek about the video. He did not mention it either, which told me everything I needed to know. He knew I would eventually see it. He was waiting for my reaction, waiting for the confrontation, waiting for the dramatic fight he could then film and turn into more content. My fiance found the video would probably get 500,000 views. I gave him nothing. On March 13th, I told Derek I had a client presentation in Atlanta the following day and would be staying overnight. This was true. I had a pitch meeting with a hotel chain called Palmetto Hospitality Group at their corporate offices on Peachtree Street. But before I left, I did something I had been considering for 3 days. I installed a small security camera in our apartment. I placed it on the bookshelf in the living room, angled toward the hallway and bedroom door. It was a Wisecam V3, a small black cube that looked exactly like the Bluetooth speaker it sat beside. The camera connected to an app on my phone and recorded continuously to cloud storage. I did not know what I would find. Part of me, a large part, hoped I would find nothing. Part of me, the part that had been quietly counting the small inconsistencies for months, already knew. I drove to Atlanta on the morning of March 14th. My pitch meeting went well. Palmetto Hospitality signed a $36,000 annual design retainer, the largest contract of my career. I should have been celebrating. Instead, at 9:32 p.m., sitting on the bed of my hotel room at the Hyatt Regency on Peachtree Street, room 417, I opened the camera app on my phone, the living room of our apartment. The lights were dimmed to that amber glow Derek liked for filming. 2 wine glasses on the coffee table, one red, one white. Derek was sitting on the couch in sweatpants and a t-shirt. Natalie Chen was sitting beside him, close, her knee touching his thigh. They were laughing about something I could not hear because the audio was muffled by distance. At 9:41 p.m., Derek put his arm around her. At 9:44, she leaned her head on his shoulder. At 9:47 p.m., Natalie lifted her head, turned toward him, and kissed him. He did not pull away. He did not hesitate. He kissed her back with the familiarity of someone who had done this many times before. They stood up together and walked down the hallway toward the bedroom. My bedroom. Our bedroom. The camera captured everything up to the point where they disappeared through the doorway. It was enough. It was more than enough. I set my phone down on the hotel nightstand. I walked into the bathroom. I turned on the shower. I sat on the cold tile floor in my clothes and let the water run over me until it turned cold. And I cried. I cried until my chest ached and my eyes swelled and there was nothing left. Then I stood up, dried off, changed into pajamas, sat on the bed with my laptop, and downloaded every second of footage to 3 separate locations. A USB drive I kept in my travel bag, my personal iCloud storage, and an encrypted email I sent to a backup address Derek did not know existed. Then I closed my laptop, set my alarm for 6 a.m., and went to sleep. I had work to do in the morning. The next 6 weeks were the most disciplined and exhausting weeks of my life. I went home to Charleston on March 15th and acted as though absolutely nothing had changed. Derek greeted me at the door, kissed my cheek, asked about the pitch. They signed, I told him. $36,000 a year. He nodded. Nice. We should celebrate. I will order Thai food. Perfect, I said, and I smiled. Natalie texted me that same evening. Hey girl, how was Atlanta? Let us do brunch this weekend. I responded with a smiley face and a thumbs up emoji and set my phone face down on the counter. I did not give either of them a single reason to suspect I knew anything. Meanwhile, I began to build. First, the legal work. I contacted a family law attorney named Grace Whitfield on March 18th. Her office was on Broad Street in a converted Georgian townhouse, a 10-minute walk from my studio. I had found her through a referral from a client who had gone through a complicated divorce. I told Grace everything. I showed her the YouTube video. I showed her the proposal footage Derek had used without my consent. I showed her the security camera footage, and I showed her the YouTube revenue reports I had access to, because Derek, in his arrogance, had made me an authorized user on his business bank account 8 months earlier to help with bookkeeping. Grace's expression did not change as I spoke, but her pen moved faster and faster across her legal pad. The proposal footage constitutes a clear violation of your right to publicity under South Carolina law, she said when I finished. He commercially exploited your likeness, your voice, and your emotional expression without consent for direct financial gain. The revenue from that video, which is currently at 92,000 views and climbing, constitutes quantifiable damages. She paused and looked at me over her glasses. And the footage of the affair? That is for the engagement party, I said. Grace studied me for a long moment. The kind of look that tells you someone is recalculating their assessment of who you are. Then she nodded slowly. You are going to need a very specific legal framework to do this cleanly. Let me handle that part. Over the next 3 weeks, Grace drafted 3 documents. A cease and desist letter for the proposal video demanding immediate removal, a formal demand for revenue sharing on all content featuring my likeness, my voice, or my design work across Derek's entire channel, and a prenuptial agreement that I had no intention of ever signing, but that would serve as the perfect cover story for why I was consulting a lawyer. If Derek or Natalie ever asked, I was just being practical about protecting my business assets before the wedding. Second, the finances. By March 25th, I had separated every financial entanglement between Derek and myself. I opened a new business account at South State Bank, 3 blocks from my studio. I moved my personal savings, now $47,300, into an individual account Derek could not access, view, or even know existed. I quietly removed myself as an authorized user on his business account, but not before downloading 18 months of detailed transaction records. Those records told an interesting story, a story Derek certainly did not intend for me to read. Since November of 2024, Derek had been paying Natalie Chen a monthly fee of $1,500. The payments were categorized in his bookkeeping software as Content Strategy Consulting. 4 payments. $6,000 total. Natalie Chen was not a content strategist. She was an occupational therapist at a rehabilitation clinic in Mount Pleasant. She had no background in marketing, no content portfolio, no consulting business. But she had been receiving $1,500 a month from my fiance for 4 months before the night I caught them on camera. The affair had not started in March. It had started at minimum in November. I printed those records and added them to the folder on my desktop, the folder labeled Exit. Third, the engagement party. Derek wanted a spectacular party. He wanted to announce the engagement publicly in front of everyone who mattered, film content for his channel, maybe even live stream part of it for his subscribers. He talked about it constantly. The venue, the guest list, the projection screen where he would play a highlight reel of our relationship. I encouraged all of this enthusiastically. I told him I would handle every detail of the planning. He was delighted. See, this is why I am marrying you, he said, squeezing my hand across the kitchen table. You just get it. I did get it. I got all of it. Every angle, every implication, every exit. I booked the rooftop terrace at the Belmont, a venue on Upper King Street with panoramic views of the Charleston Harbor, for April 26. Capacity 120. I sent invitations to 130 people, knowing roughly 15 to 20 would decline. I ordered catering from a farm-to-table restaurant called Edmund's Oast, $32 per plate, a menu of shrimp and grits, pork belly sliders, and roasted vegetable crostini. I hired a DJ, and I rented that 10-foot projection screen Derek wanted for his highlight reel. I even helped him connect his laptop to the venue's AV system during the tech rehearsal, 2 days before the party. "This is going to be incredible," he kept saying, adjusting the aspect ratio. "Everyone is going to see how good we are together." I stood behind him, watching him fiddle with cables, and said nothing. During those 6 weeks, Natalie continued to be my best friend with flawless dedication. She helped me choose centerpieces at a floral shop on Meeting Street. She came to 2 dress fittings at a boutique called Madison Row. She sat across from me at brunch at Poogan's porch every Sunday morning, ordered the same crab cake Benedict she always ordered, and talked about how excited she was for my wedding. On April 10th, she gave me a card. The front had a watercolor illustration of 2 women holding hands with wildflowers in their hair. Inside, in her careful handwriting, she had written, "To my ride or die. There is no one I would rather stand beside on your big day. I love you forever, Nat." I read it at my kitchen table after she left. I placed it carefully in the folder labeled Exit. Then I poured myself a glass of Sauvignon Blanc and sat in the silence of my apartment. The apartment where she had been 6 weeks ago, in my bed, with my fiance. I did not cry. I was past crying. I was building. If you are still watching this, I need to pause for just a moment and say something directly to you. This is the part of the story where everything changes. Everything I have told you so far, the YouTube video, the proposal, the affair, the legal strategy, that is all set up. What comes next is the night itself, and I need you to understand something. I did not do what I did next out of rage. I did not do it to humiliate anyone. I did it because 112 people were about to raise their glasses and toast a lie, and I decided that the truth deserved to have at least the same audience that the lies had been enjoying. So if this story is resonating with you, if you have ever been the woman whose pain was turned into someone else's punchline, whose worst moment became someone else's best content, drop a comment below and tell me you are here. And if you have not already, subscribe and hit that notification bell, because what happened on that rooftop is something you will not want to miss. Now, let me tell you about the party. April 26, 2025. The weather was perfect, as if Charleston itself was cooperating. 74 degrees, clear sky, a salt breeze coming off the harbor that smelled like pluff mud and jasmine. The rooftop terrace at the Belmont looked extraordinary in the early evening light. String lights crisscrossed above the open-air space in geometric patterns. White linen tables with glass centerpieces full of white ranunculus surrounded a central dance floor made of reclaimed wood. The 10-foot projection screen stood against the far wall, flanked by professional speakers. Guests began arriving at 7 p.m. Derek wore a navy suit I had bought him for his birthday. I wore a white midi dress from a boutique on Calhoun Street that cost me $420. Natalie arrived at 7:15 in a sage green dress, her dark hair pulled back in a low chignon. She hugged me at the entrance, held my shoulders, looked into my eyes and said, "You look stunning, Camille. Tonight is going to be the best night of your life." I hugged her back and held on for exactly 1 second too long, just enough to feel her stiffen slightly. "You have no idea," I said. My parents were there, front table, right side. My father Michel in his one good suit, my mother Diane in the blue dress she wore to every important family occasion. My younger brother Julian, 25, a second-year law student at the University of South Carolina, sat beside them, already on his second bourbon. Derek's mother, Patricia, had flown in from Richmond. She was at table too, dabbing her eyes before the party even officially started, because she was that kind of mother, the kind who cried at beauty. Derek's college roommate, Travis Keene, 32, an insurance adjuster in Columbia, was the unofficial best man. He was at the bar telling a story that involved hand gestures, and Brandon Mercer and Alicia Nguyen were there, both with cameras, both planning to film the event for a collaborative video about engagement parties and relationship milestones. Derek had invited them specifically for this purpose. I knew because he had told me. I had counted on it. By 8:15 p.m., the terrace was full. 112 guests, 17 tables. The DJ transitioned from soft jazz to acoustic covers. People laughed and mingled and clinked champagne flutes and said all the things people say at engagement parties. How happy they were, how perfect we were, how love was real. At 8:45, Derek took the microphone. He stood in front of the projection screen, the harbor twinkling behind him like a postcard, and addressed the crowd. Thank you all for being here tonight. Camille and I are so incredibly grateful for your love and your support. I wanted to show you something special, a little highlight reel of our journey together, because you are all part of this story. He pressed play on his laptop. His montage ran for 4 minutes and 12 seconds. Photos from our first trip to Savannah. A clip of us cooking pasta in the apartment kitchen, flour on my nose, him laughing. A slow-motion shot from the proposal, me saying yes, my hands shaking, our friends rushing out from behind the partition. The crowd clapped warmly. Several people wiped their eyes. Patricia Holloway was openly sobbing into a linen napkin. Derek took a small bow, enjoying the moment the way he always enjoyed moments, with one eye on the audience. And that, he said, grinning his camera-ready grin, is just the beginning. He turned to me. Camille, do you want to say a few words? I stood up from my chair. I smoothed my dress. I walked to the microphone, my heels clicking on the wooden floor, each step deliberate, measured, calm. I looked at Derek. I looked at Natalie at table 4, her champagne glass raised halfway to her lips. I looked at the room full of people who loved us, or loved the story of us, which is not the same thing at all. Thank you, Derek, I said, my voice steady as a flat lake. That was beautiful. And since you have been so generous about sharing our story with the world lately, I thought tonight I would share a few more chapters that did not make your highlight reel. I pulled the small black remote from the hidden pocket of my dress. I pressed the first button. The screen flickered. Derek's YouTube video appeared. Girlfriend red flags I ignored because I was in love. His face, his studio, his voice filling the rooftop speakers. See this? This is love bombing. She is performing. She needs everyone to see her emotions. The crowd went still. People looked at each other confused. Derek's smile collapsed 1 degree at a time, like a building settling before it falls. Camille, what is this? He said, stepping toward me. I stepped back, keeping the microphone between us. Let them watch, Derek. You wanted an audience. You have one. The second clip played. Derek's voice again, confident, analytical, cruel. Watch her eyes. First thing she does is check the ring, not look at me. The ring that tells you everything about her priorities. The gasps began. Quiet ones at first, then louder. Patricia Holloway set her champagne down so carefully it did not make a sound. Travis Keene at the bar had turned around, his glass frozen in midair. My mother's hand found my father's under the table. The third segment was something I had spent an entire evening editing. Screenshots of the comment section scrolling slowly up the screen in silence. Bro, run. She is definitely the type to baby trap you. Red flag factory. Dump her before the wedding king. 712 strangers mocking me. Displayed on a 10-foot screen in front of every person who had ever loved me. I let the comments scroll for 15 seconds. Nobody spoke. Then I addressed the room. 3 weeks after Derek proposed to me on Valentine's Day, he uploaded our proposal video, the one he promised was just for us, to his YouTube channel. He used it to make a video calling me a collection of red flags. That video has been viewed over 400,000 times. It has generated approximately $14,600 in advertising revenue. He used the most intimate moment of my life as content. He used my tears as a thumbnail. He used our love as clickbait. And he never told me. Derek's face had lost all color. Camille, listen, I can explain. It was taken out of context. The video was not about you specifically. It was just content. It was a character. You used my face, Derek. You used my voice. You used the exact moment you asked me to marry you, and you turned it into a punchline for strangers on the internet who called me desperate and manipulative and shallow. That is not context. That is a choice you made. I turned back to the screen. But that is not the reason we are here tonight. I pressed the remote one final time. The security camera footage appeared. The living room of our apartment, amber lighting. 2 wine glasses on the coffee table. March 14th, 9:32 p.m. Derek on the couch. Natalie beside him, the arm around her shoulder at 9:41. The heads together at 9:44. The kiss at 9:47. The walk down the hallway. I let it play for exactly 28 seconds. Long enough for every person in that room to see what they were seeing. Long enough for certainty. Then I pressed pause. The silence that followed was not just the absence of sound. It was the absence of everything, every assumption, every illusion, every polite fiction that had held this evening and this relationship together. It collapsed in 28 seconds. Natalie was frozen at table 4. Her face was the color of parchment. Her hands were trembling so badly that the silverware beside her plate was vibrating against the porcelain. The champagne stain on the tablecloth had reached the edge and was dripping slowly onto the terrace floor. Derek did not move. He stood beside me, 6 feet away, his arms hanging at his sides, his mouth opening and closing without sound. A man who had built a career on always having the right words suddenly discovering what it felt like to have none. The first person to move was my mother. Diane Renaud, 57 years old, retired school librarian, the gentlest woman I have ever known, stood up from her chair, walked across the terrace in her blue dress and low heels, and placed herself directly beside me at the podium. She did not say a word. She just stood there, her shoulder touching mine. Then my brother Julian stood. Then my father Michel, a man who had not raised his voice in 30 years, looked directly at Derek and said, in his quiet Greenville accent that somehow carried across the entire rooftop, "Son, you should leave now." Patricia Holloway, Derek's own mother, was crying again, but these were different tears. She looked at her son with an expression I will carry with me for the rest of my life, a mixture of horror and recognition and grief, as though she was seeing something she had always feared but never allowed herself to name. Travis Keene, Derek's best man since college, set his bourbon on the bar, walked to the center of the terrace, removed the boutonniere from his lapel, placed it carefully on the nearest tablecloth, and walked to the elevator without a word. He did not look back. Brandon Mercer lowered his camera. Alicia Wynne turned to him and said, loud enough for 3 surrounding tables to hear, "I told you something was off about him. I told you months ago." Derek finally found words. They were the wrong ones. "Camille, please, can we go somewhere private and talk about this? This is between us." "Private?" I said, and my voice did not shake. It did not rise. It did not break. "You made our proposal public for 400,000 strangers. You made my tears public. You made my vulnerability public. You turned my love into a monetized spectacle for men who have never met me to judge. You do not get to call anything private anymore, Derek. You gave up that right when you pressed upload." I removed the engagement ring from my finger, a 1.3-carat oval-cut diamond, purchased for $8,200 from a jeweler on Meeting Street. I knew the exact price because Derek had told me. More than once. I placed it on the podium beside the microphone. "This is yours," I said. "I do not want it. I do not want the wedding. I do not want the story you were writing about us for your channel. And I do not want a life with a man who performs love for cameras and practices betrayal behind them." I turned to Natalie. She had not moved from table 4. The mascara was running. The sage green dress looked wrong on her now, like a costume from a play that had been canceled mid-performance. "Natalie," I said. Just her name. Nothing else. She opened her mouth. "Camille, I am so sorry. It was not I never meant for." "You were my maid of honor," I said. "You helped me pick centerpieces. You came to dress biddings. You wrote me a card that said ride or die. I paused. $1,500 a month. That is what he paid you. Content Strategy Consulting, for 4 months before that footage was even recorded. Was any of it real, Natalie? The brunches, the texts, the 11 years? She did not answer. She could not. My brother Julian, who had been standing quietly beside our mother, stepped forward. He looked at Derek with the calm, measured expression of a man who was very carefully choosing not to do what his body wanted him to do. You have about 60 seconds to get to that elevator, he said, and I strongly recommend you use them. Derek left. He picked up his laptop but forgot the remote. He walked to the elevator, pressed the button, and waited with his back to the room while 112 people watched him in absolute silence. The elevator doors opened. He stepped inside without turning around. The doors closed. And just like that, the man who built a career telling other men how to spot red flags became one. The aftermath was both quieter and louder than I expected. Quieter in the personal spaces. Derek never came back to the apartment. He sent a text message 2 days later that read, "I will send someone for my things." He did not apologize. He did not explain. He simply retreated into the digital silence of a man whose audience had turned on him. His YouTube channel lost 11,000 subscribers in 1 week. His Patreon community, the Inner Circle, dissolved almost overnight, with 92% of paying members canceling within 5 days. The brand partnerships evaporated. Every single sponsor pulled their deal within 72 hours of clips from the engagement party surfacing online. Because the aftermath was louder on the internet, Brandon and Alicia had not been the only ones capturing the evening. At least 4 other guests had filmed portions of the reveal on their phones. Within 48 hours, clips were circulating on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, and Reddit. A 12-second clip of me placing the ring on the podium and saying, "I do not want it," received 6.4 million views on TikTok alone. The comments were overwhelming, and for the first time they were on my side. Derek uploaded one final video on April 27th, a 10-minute defense titled, "My Side of the Story." It received a 94% dislike ratio and a comment section so hostile he disabled comments within 3 hours. I never watched it. I did not need his side. I had lived inside it. My attorney, Grace Whitfield, filed the cease and desist on May 1st. The proposal video was removed from YouTube within 72 hours. The formal revenue demand was filed simultaneously. Derek's attorney attempted to negotiate a settlement of $4,000. Grace countered with the full documented amount, $67,300 across 12 videos that had featured my design work, my face, or my voice without consent. They settled in June for $41,000 and a permanent injunction prohibiting Derek from using any footage, imagery, or likeness of me in any future content. Ever. I used that money to hire my first full-time employee, a junior designer named Priya Kapoor. The business grew. By September, Renault Creative had 28 clients and was generating $19,000 a month. I moved my studio to a larger space on East Bay Street with a view of the harbor, the same harbor I had stared at from that rooftop on April 26th. On the wall above my new desk, I hung a small framed print. It reads, in simple black type on white paper, "She built it in silence." Natalie reached out once, on May 3rd. A long text message that began with, "I know I do not deserve your forgiveness," and ended with, "I hope someday you can understand." I read it once. I did not respond. There was nothing to say to a woman who sat across from me at brunch every Sunday, who held my hand in dress fitting rooms, who wrote "Ride or Die" on a card while scheduling Tuesday nights in my bed with my fiance. Understanding was never the issue. I understood perfectly. She made a choice. Every Tuesday for 4 months, she made the same choice again. That is not confusion or weakness. That is a pattern. And patterns do not deserve explanations. They deserve boundaries. People ask me sometimes if I regret what I did at the party. The question itself tells me something important about what we expect from women. When a man exposes his partner's most private moments to 500,000 strangers for advertising revenue, we call it content creation. When a woman exposes a betrayal to 112 people who are about to toast a lie, we call it making a scene. I did not make a scene. I made a correction. I gave the truth the same platform the lies had been performing on. That is not revenge. That is equity. I do not think about Derek often anymore. When I do, it is not with anger. It is with a kind of clarity that only comes from distance and from building something real. He was not a monster. He was a man who confused an audience with a relationship, who mistook being watched for being known, who believed that performing love was the same as practicing it. I hope he figures that out someday. I genuinely do. But not in front of a ring light, not in a studio with 2 cameras running, away from content, away from thumbnails, away from the dopamine hit of a notification bell, in the kind of silence where real growth actually happens, the uncomfortable kind, the kind that does not come with a subscriber count attached, not the kind of silence where you hide affairs and call it editing. As for Natalie, I think about her differently. Losing a partner hurts. Losing an 11-year friendship is a different wound entirely, deeper, older, harder to locate because it is buried under so many good memories that turned out to be contaminated. She knew my secrets, my fears, my insecurities. She sat in the front row of my vulnerability and used that access to take the one thing I thought was safe. I do not hate her. Hate requires energy. I would rather invest in my studio, my clients, my future, but I will never trust her again. And I have made peace with that. Some doors do not close gently. They seal shut with the weight of evidence and the quiet resolve of a woman who finally stopped making excuses for the people who never made room for her. And that is not bitterness. That is architecture. That is knowing exactly which walls to keep and which ones to tear down and which ones were never real to begin with. If you are watching this and you see yourself anywhere in my story, if your worst moment was turned into someone else's content, if your trust was monetized, if the person who was supposed to protect your heart was instead performing with it for an audience, I want to tell you something. You do not owe anyone a performance of being okay. You do not have to audition for love from someone who has already cast your understudy. And you do not have to stay silent just because speaking up might make you look difficult. The loudest comebacks are built in silence. I know, because I built mine. And it did not start with a speech on a rooftop. It started with a folder on a desktop named Exit, and a woman who decided, quietly, without tears, without drama, that she was done being someone else's content. So here's my question, and I mean this sincerely. Have you ever discovered that the person you loved most was performing your entire relationship for an audience? And when you found out, what did you do? Did you confront them? Did you walk away? Did you build? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. Before I go, I want to take a moment to thank you, personally, for staying through this entire story. You did not have to. You could have scrolled past. You could have clicked away. But you stayed, and that tells me something about who you are. You are someone who believes that the quiet ones have something worth hearing. You are someone who understands that strength does not always look like a raised voice. Sometimes it looks like a woman, standing at a podium with steady hands and a folder full of truth. This channel exists because 3 women who had been talked over their entire lives decided to build a microphone instead of waiting for someone to hand them one. With AI narration and original storytelling, we bring these real inspired stories to you every single day on Revenge Chronicles, because the world has enough loud voices and not nearly enough people listening to the quiet ones. If even one sentence in this story made you feel less alone, then it was worth every word. Subscribe if you have not already. Hit the bell. Come back tomorrow, because there is always another woman, another story, and another silence about to break. The quietest women always deliver the loudest outcomes.